Bonjour, Denignish Disnakas Dude Mabus, Biktagan Anishnabik Nandonji. My given name is Donald Michano. I come from the community of Biktagan Anishnabik, formerly Pick River. I'm here today they asked me to speak and to what to speak on and give some teachings. And she asked me what to title it. And I just said Donald Michano. I've traveled since I was probably 12, 11 years old, and I've traveled a lot of different places. This side, Treaty 3, the other side, Sault Ste. Marie, Wacomiquan, Sudbury, Kenora, Winnipeg. I've had a lot of teachings early on in my life that gave me an understanding of things. And there was a period of time in my life where I really struggled, and I kind of stepped away from a lot of stuff, and I became a father, and I kind of raised my kids, and I stepped away for a couple of years. But I always remembered initially what I was taught growing up, and I've always heard when the elders spoke, they used this word, Atsokan. Atsokan. And I wondered always what that was. And I went and I spoke to somebody back home about what that was. And this was only maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I'm not a speaker and I don't know the language. But I was told in our dialect that Atsokan is the legends and stories that define who we are. So I have to look at that and give an understanding of what I do, Atsokan, to me, that understanding of who I've become. And what I speak of today are the teachings and the understanding of what has made me who I am. When I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, I remember very clearly sitting at my grandmother's house. And those that know where my grandmother lived, she lived right on the Pick River. And the Pick River is a major corridor for our people to travel, And the Pick River flows into Lake Superior, so it's all connected. And I remember seeing these little men, And I remember very clearly what they said and what they looked. And to have that as a young one and not knowing what it was made you kind of think otherwise. And I remember as I grew into an older individual, I remember looking behind my house as a child, and that's the same thing. The river was there. And I remember always seeing this old man standing there with a headdress looking at me. And I always had visitors from spirits. And I didn't know what they were at the time. But they came to me and they showed me things and they told me things. And it wasn't until I started sitting at the drum. And the first time I remember I did that was I was at our old hall, and there was an old man sitting there with braids, and he was sitting by, I didn't know what it was at the time, but it was something that sat on 4 legs, and it had feathers hanging. And when he hit that, it just echoed, and it went right through me. And that old man looked at me, and I went and sat, and he gave me something, and I started screaming, I wasn't singing, but I was screaming. I just felt it. And from that point on, I kind of walked towards a lot of stuff. And as Anishinaabe people, a lot of our youth and kids that are growing up don't have that identity, and they're lost. As Anishinaabe people, we're born into a world of purpose. As Anishinaabe people, they say before we're conceived, we sit in the star world. And we have counsel with the grandfathers. and we bargain of what our lives are going to be. We bargain and we look down and we see our parents and we pick those people as our mums and our dads. And we go as far as picking our careers. We go as far as having that identity. We're born into a clan. We're born into a name. We're born into purpose. Because that's our role as Anishinaabe people. And when we're conceived, there's a lot of times that purpose comes to us right away. And we're given our names. Our family has our clans. And we have that identity. We walk through that identity in life. And when we have that, we live a good life. But that loss of identity for our Anishinaabe people, they're born, they don't know who they are. They don't know where they come from. Some of them grow up in the system where they have absolutely no idea of anything. They feel that draw, eh? They feel something pulling them somewhere, but they don't know what it is. So they get lost and they act out. They're angry, they're frustrated. And there's that saying, you can take an Indian out of the reserve, but you can never take the reserve out of the Indian, because there's always that pull there. There's always that understanding. So we have to have that identity as Anishinaabe people. I struggled a long time when I first started walking this way because I didn't have a name. And when I went to ceremony, everybody else introduced themselves. So I went and I asked an elder by the name of Elmer Kershane to give me a name. And like a kid in a candy store, I was waiting. Every day I'd go and see him. When's my name? And he'd always laugh, not yet. He said, I got your mom's name, I got your dad's name, not yet. And then I went to him one day and he says, you got to be patient, boy. And he laughed. He says, I don't know why, but the Creator's taken long with you. And then I kind of gave up. And one day he came over and he says, I got your name. He says, prepare to get ready. And he told me what to do. I got the ceremony ready and I went. And he gave me that name. My mom and dad and myself got our names at the same time. And when he gave me that name, he kind of touched me on the head and he laughed. And he says, I don't know what's up with you, boy. He says, but the spirits took so long with you, and they said this name is only for a while. He says, you have to learn to slow down. He says, you can't run. You got to be patient, and you got to really take your time walking in life, because if you don't, you're going to fall on your face. Right? And he said my name was Denignes, meaning little seeker. And that really defined me. He says, you'll always be looking and always be seeking. And until you find a time where you can settle down and stop seeking and stop understanding, in a sense, biting off more than you can chew, then that's going to be your name. And that made a lot of sense, even to this day. And as I grew, I kind of had those understandings, again, going back to hearing people speak, Bojo Denignes, that's my name. And they say, your clan, your identity. And I'm not a real expert on the clan system, but from my understanding, there's certain sub-clans, and then from the sub-clans breaks down into, there's major clans, and then they break down into the sub-clans. And one of the old men in my community came up to me one time, and he says, your grandfather was from the Rabbit clan. And I never heard anything in that, of the clans from a rabbit. But I honored that man for years. And then I was starting to questioning things again, And I went and I talked to a couple of elders, and they explained that the Martin clan has a sub-clan, and from that sub-clan is a rabbit. And he says, and the Martin clans are hunters and providers. And that made a lot of sense, because that was something that was given to me very early, was I can go out and hunt, I can go out and fish. And it's the same thing with my boys. They can do that. And it just happens, So that kind of really connected a lot of my identity. And that's why it's so important when we're working with our clientele and our kids, is that they understand their name, they understand their clan. because that gives them that purpose. That gives them that identity that they need. And again, like I said, that you can't take an Indian from the reserve, kind of thing. They always feel that. You hear people talk about blood memory, and you see that very clearly when you go and do stuff with kids. For drums, for example. I've done workshops with 50 youth, and I've done workshops with 10 kids, and you always look around and you see, some of the ones that really struggle, and they can't do that. And then you see other ones that just pick that up, and their hands, they don't know what they're doing. And they say, why is it working like this? How come I can do that? But that's in them. It's in their blood. It's in who they are. It's in their DNA. And that's something that they have to be very, very good at, because that's who they are. That what she did to us today with those little words, a lot of us pick that up, and that's who we are, right? We can't get away from that. We can't. We can't change that. And sometimes, our most gifted elders were one time children who struggled. And they couldn't find things, or they got in trouble because they were always trying to do this, do that. And as a society, some of the kids are labeled, right? ADHD, attachment disorder, when those are the most gifted kids. They're a lot of times they're geniuses, or they have that understanding that there's more to it. And as for me, I was gifted with that spirit, right? At a young age. If I were to have spoken to that in mainstream society, I would be branded as a certain type of person, and I would be frowned upon by society because I had that gift to see. So that spirit, and how would I say it? From society, mainstream society, to the reality of our ways of life, there's a big disconnect, and a lot of times people don't acknowledge that. The society most times wins, and the spirit is forgotten, and our kids struggle. Our kids hurt. Our kids have that pain. I've worked in mainstream child welfare for a long time, probably too long, and I had a real reputation in the communities as being like the bad guy that knocked on the doors or whatever, But I had to understand that and figure that out. So, you got your names, you got your clans. Another thing of purpose that we have to understand is our vision quests, and our berry fasts, things that we have to connect back to our kids. We have to teach them that, because it gives them, again, that purpose, and further builds upon who we are when going from the initial start, when we have that consultation with, not consultation, but we're meeting with Creator and the grandfathers and deciding our life. So when we first go on our vision quest, I can only speak for myself, but when I left home, and I went to a place up in Armstrong with a few elders and a few chums. And it was a challenging thing in my life. For those who have ever experienced like a vision quest, being alone, being alone with yourself, like being alone with quiet. Sometimes quiet could be the loudest thing you've ever heard in your life, when that's all you hear is quiet. And that's when you struggle. You go through every emotion, you want to leave. I was probably 16 when I first went. And first night we were there, I got my vision and I was done. But that vision I had, I seen myself on a podium, and I was looking down, and I was talking to kids, and I was teaching them. And I was 16 when I got that. And I was standing by a lady. My interpretation of that was I would marry that lady, and we would work together. But she married somebody else, and I was wondering what was going on. But that's just kind of a joke, right? But so when I probably about 6 years ago or 5 years ago, they actually created this program, and I was still in child welfare, and at that point in my life, I was ready to quit. I was ready to bash myself in the head. I was kind of loopy, and I was gone. And somebody came up to me when I was up here. Actually, we were sitting here, and they pulled me outside and said, "There's a job coming up. You should apply." So I put my name in, and they hired me, and they offered me the job, and I was still on child welfare, and they had asked me to go to the school, and this was only maybe 6 years ago, 5 years ago. So they asked me to go to the high school, and I walked into the high school, and I didn't know what I was going to talk about, and I had a feather, not this one, but I had another feather, and the class was kind of sitting like this. And I was talking over here, and I was kind of gibberish and kind of figure out what I was going to do. I started talking about child welfare. And then I started moving, and I went to the front of the class, and I talked. And then I put my hands up on a podium. And I was looking down at all these kids, and then bang, right? I went back to when I was 16, when I got that vision of teaching the kids, working for the people. And that's when it clicked. So if you connect all those things from our names, our clans, our vision quests, things are giving our people identity. That gives them that structure. And sometimes they struggle inside because we're seeing things that we shouldn't see, that we can't say to mainstream society, right? Because they're going to think we're kind of loopy in the head. And I may get in trouble for using that analogy, but the reality is a lot of our kids struggle, and it's not until we start giving them that purpose. And you heard Dustin talk about that. Dustin's a real gifted singer, and he has a big family. He has a huge family, and that's his purpose, right? And that's where he finds that peace. And it's like my grandson. He was born March of last year, and once we found out he was conceived, we went to the elders and we spoke to them and asked them for a name. And he was born, and we waited a while, to go back to the elder. And then when my wife went back, she said, "I thought you forgot about me." She says, "The night you gave me that tobacco, before he was born, the spirits came to me." And she said when she came to the ceremony, she talked about Atsokan. And she said she talked about that. She talked about the lodges. She talked about giving life. She talked about the ability to kind of show him. And she put the responsibility on all of us to ensure that young one went back to the lodges, went back to the ceremonies, went back to the land, because his name was Ka'atsokik. And the way she described it was, he will be the one that will tell the legends, right? So it was our responsibility to give him that. So he started with that purpose, and as he goes in his life, we continue to feed that purpose to him. Because that's who he is, and that's who he's meant to be. And whenever I take him to our turtle lodge and he sits on the drum, you watch him and he's going like this, and he's smiling. What's he doing? What's he really doing? I ask him, "What do you see up there, boy?" And all he does is smile, right? I don't want to question. Don't look up there, because I know what he's seeing, And there's so many things that go with that. Like Fawn talked about the Tikanagan. That responsibility of that young one is not mine. It's not his mom's. He has aunties. He has uncles. He has friends. And people that sit on our drum. Those are my brothers. Those are his uncles. And that's that understanding, right? So we have to really look at a lot of that when we're working with our kids. We have to give them that understanding. We have to give them that identity. And I heard an old man speak one time. He says, our body is made of a spirit and our body is made of a soul. He says, the only time our soul steps out of our body is when we die. He says, but our spirit often leaves. And that leads to loss, a really empty feeling inside. He says, chances are when we do something wrong, our spirit gets mad and it steps out of us. And it walks beside us until we correct that. And that's why we feel that emptiness. And he referred to alcohol. I 49 years old. I quit around 18, 19 years old. I experimented once during that lifespan, but that is something that I believe, You can't do these kinds of things correctly or honestly without having that addiction or that use, because your spirit steps out and you don't have that full connection. So those are some things that I believe, so sometimes our spirit steps out and we feel lost, and we have to correct what we've done for our spirit to step back in, to feel that wholeness again. Because as adults, we start from here and we kind of, the higher up that hill we go, the smarter we're supposed to get. But some of us, they go the other way, The less sense we have and the more lost we get, And again, it's that responsibility to help the people, to help people move and not be judgmental. So those are things, that my belief has gotten me to where I am. I acknowledge today that we're on Fort William First Nation land. I acknowledge today that we're sitting besides one of the greatest bodies of water in the world. I acknowledge that connection of that Thunder Mountain, because that's one of two of the most sacred spots that I know within our area, where people have come for years and generations to acknowledge. So it's a beauty. It's a beauty of a world. But that understanding of that spirit, that understanding of things happen for a reason. Purpose, right? To me, we are people of purpose, We have a kind of plan that we put forth a long time ago before we were conceived. And that plan is for us to kind of follow through. And that's what they say, about that feather. Is that's our lifeline. That is our soul lifeline that we were given. And a lot of times we fall off and we can go back on, And at some point when we get wise enough, we get to the end, and that's when we pass. Or we leave. Sometimes in life we lose loved ones too early, and that's a sad thing. And there are so many different teachings about life out there. There's so many different understandings about who we are as an Anishinaabe people. My stories and my Atsokan, my stories that define who I am, are the teachings that I believe. And some may not see it that way, and that's okay, You can take from what I've shared, you can use bits of it. You can make it part of. I sat and I listened to Jim Dumont, the creation story, for 4 days. And at the start, he says, this is my creation story. He says, this is my story of the way I see creation, as how it started. And he says, you're going to take from here what you want or what you think, and you'll come up with your own creation story to define who you are. and I got a lot out of that 4 days, right? And I draw on bits and pieces of that. So it's things that I've learned. It's things that I've come to an understanding of. I have to acknowledge, like Alex Skeed, I have to acknowledge Jim Windigo. I have to acknowledge Elmer Crashane. I have to acknowledge Jim Dumont. I have to acknowledge my parents. And I have to acknowledge some of my hardships in life, because those are the things that defined me. I feel like I'm rambling now, so I'll kind of say miigwech. Again, you know what? My Anishinaabe name is Little Seeker. I come from, they say, what's the Rabbit clan, and my mom was Sheila Michano. My dad is Roy Michano, and I'm a proud husband of Julie, and I got 3 kids. Jeremy is my oldest son, and his partner is Ali. Ali's from Whitefish Bay, and Ali's got a daughter named Jazz. My youngest daughter, my only daughter is Tiffany. Her partner is Dion Desmolin, and they have our little River. And River and Dion are kind of connected with Mobert, so kind of between Pick River and Mobert, what's called a crow gull, I guess, because Moberts are crows and Pick Rivers are seagulls, so we call them a crow gull. And my youngest son, Bailey, he doesn't have a partner yet. Well, I think he's got more than, he's a very charming individual, so I'll leave it at that with him. My kids have all really succeeded right now, and they're doing well for themselves, and they all have their Anishinaabe names. They all understand who their clans are. They may not pick up a pipe, they may not sit at a drum, but they have inclines of what we've given them, and they know who they are. They've known where they come from. They know the teachings, and they have that to fall back on. And usually when they get to the point of they can't figure it out, that's where they go. So that's the most we can ask for our clients and our kids that we work with. Spirit will take you a long way, but you also have to push yourself a little bit and do some of the work, So with that, I'll say, miigwech.